are live. Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Palermo. I'm with the Developer Relations team at HERE Technologies, and with me here is
Richard, also with the Developer Relations team at HERE.
So happy to be here for another episode of Waypoints. Waypoints, of course, is our series, our developer series, and specifically, we are in season number 3, and I believe, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Richard, but I think season 3 is all about using our location services in the context of Android SDK.
That's correct. And specifically, we have a whole new versions of various SDKs out there. HERE SDK for Android, but also HERE SDK for iOS. There's even a beta version of an SDK for Flutter. And we're starting to talk about the Android SDK, though hopefully later in the year we'll also talk about iOS as well.
Awesome. So, with regard to today's episode, which is now episode number 4, I personally am excited to see what you're going to be doing because I feel like geocoding and search, these are some of the hottest things that developers want when they're getting into location services. However, for those that would be interested in the first 3 episodes, I'm putting you on the spot, but I just want to know, can you remember the topics that were discussed in the previous 3 and where they can go if they want to watch those?
Yeah, I think in the very first episode we just talked about getting started. Just basically how to get an app going with a map in it. Mm-hmm. Then we talked about adding map objects to the map. Think markers, think drawing polylines and polygons onto the map. And then there was also another episode. And I'm now trying to think about what that episode was, and I realize I probably should have had more coffee before starting this. But the good news is you can find all of those episodes on YouTube and find out for yourself what the other episode was. If you go to YouTube, you find the HERE Technologies YouTube channel. Then all episodes of Waypoints, including the past seasons, will be there. And also this episode will eventually, a week or 2 from now, show up on YouTube for your viewing pleasure.
Absolutely. And more than likely, at some point in the episode, I'll just reference that link so that everybody can take a look. So, with that stated, do you have a particular pitch for today? Like, can you give us a preview of what we can expect?
Sure. Today, we'll basically take the app as we left it last week. I think I tried to make it look better in between, and I've made it look significantly worse. So that's exciting and something to look forward to. And we will extend it with some new functionality along the lines of searching. So think about searching for places, points of interest. So think about searching for addresses, and also think about auto-suggestion. So whenever you've seen these kind of things, when your phone pops up somewhere and asks you to put in an address and it starts to autocomplete that address, or it asks you, or you want to search somewhere for a certain place and you start typing, I don't know, pizza, and it has a list of the nearby pizza places that kind of automatically start popping up for you. That's the kind of thing we're looking into. There's other ways to search as well. You can search by categories. We'll look into that if we have the time. And you can do geocoding in general, which is basically not just searching for addresses, but also kind of essentially converting geo-coordinates into address coordinates and address coordinates into geo-coordinates, and vice versa. So those are the things we'll look at today.
That sounds awesome. And just a reminder for anyone who's doing any of our viewing, that if you have any questions that you would like to ask, feel free to go into the chat and ask away. And with that stated, do you want to go to code view?
First, I think Kubera speaking redeemed dinosaur mode, which I think means that we need to take 2 minutes and talk about my desktop background and talk about the dinosaur that's on the background desktop. Even though, once again, today it is not a dinosaur, though it is a saur, and it is an animal that lived during the time of the dinosaurs. Today we are looking at an ichthyosaurus, which is a saurus and which lived, in fact,
Should I put that screen on? Because right now we don't
yes,
have.
absolutely.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. We have to switch to dinosaur mode so I can show the
Please.
dinosaur.
Yes. Now we can understand what you're referring to. Okay.
Okay, definitely need more coffee. Let's see how this goes. We're off to an exciting start. So this is an ichthyosaur. Specifically, I believe this is supposed to be Ichthyosaurus, which is an ichthyosaur, the most famous one, and what this whole group of animals is named after. And they were basically sort of dolphins of the dinosaur area. They're not related to dolphins, even though they really kind of look very similar. And that's because of convergent evolution. Similar to dolphins and whales, those animals evolved by first ending up on land as reptiles, and then as reptiles going back into the water and once again, losing their arms and legs and turning into flippers. And this whole group of animals, there was quite a bit of variety, but this is sort of the archetypal one.
Gotcha.
All right.
Okay.
In that case, I think we should probably get started, and I should open up Android Studio. So I've got our project open from last time, and I'm going to quickly run this in our emulator to see how it looks like, see if it still works, go through it, and see some of the changes I've made. So, if you remember, now I remember what the other episode was. So the first episode was how to get started, just getting a map going. The second episode was changing the map style, loading a custom map style, and most importantly, changing and manipulating the camera, which with 3D now and vector tiles and so on is a bit more complicated than just moving the camera around, pointing it down. And then the episode afterwards, we drew polylines on the map, we drew markers on the map, and we pinned Android views onto the map. And I think if I click this, look, there's a polyline, look, there's a marker, look, there's an Android view pinned to the map, should still work. I can switch through the various camera angles that we set up. Those still work, all very nice. This was with a little bounding box. I can change the map style. We've got a little satellite here. We've got a night mode. We've got our custom. So all of this still works, but you've noticed I've added a couple of things. First, I've added a text box, which if I type into it, nothing happens. And I've added 3 buttons: places, address, and suggest. And if I click all of these, also nothing happens. And that's because they are wired up to 3 methods called search places, search address, and search autosuggest. And all of these 3 do absolutely nothing. And in fact, our purpose here during the show is to fill these with life and start searching for places, start searching for addresses, and give the autosuggest API a try. And then maybe if we have some time, we can also give category search a try, but we'll see.
Okay.
And maybe reverse geocoding. Okay, so let's get going. So what we want to do, like I said, we want to search for places. And the first thing we want to search for are points of interest. So really think about anything like restaurants, think gas stations, think hospitals, really, think museums, any kind of place that is of interest that you might want to get to or might want to get information about. So we want to search for those, maybe get some information about it, display it on the map. And in order to search using the Android SDK, what you have to do is you have to create a search engine. So we're saying private search engine, search engine. Almost finished.
What?
Okay, no, I'm kidding. But as a next step, we now have to initialize this. We can do this in onCreate, why not? And we'll say, we'll give this a little bit of a try block here and do a catch, because this will throw us an error if the initialization doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Why doesn't it do what I want it to do? Okay, whatever. So we'll just say search engine equals new search engine. I don't even think there's any parameters to put in there. And then we'll catch an initialization. Oh, that's not what I want. An instantiation error exception. I think that's what we want here.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we probably just need to do a bit of error handling, and we're throwing a new runtime exception and saying, oh no, something went terribly wrong. I will continue my tradition of excellent error handling from previous Waypoint episodes in this episode.
Excellent.
So we've, and I'm not doing this because error handling is bad. I'm doing it because we only have an hour and there's so much to talk about. And so
sure.
I don't want to spend talking about correct error handling.
Gotcha.
Good. So we've got our search engine initialized. And now we can go into our search places method, and we can have a look at what we need to do. So in order to start searching, we need to set up a search options object. We'll call it search options, and we'll say new search options.
Hey, and while you're typing that, let me ask you a question. You know, just because, let's say someone's just tuning in and they didn't see the previous 3 episodes, the references that you're using right now, all these classes, objects, so forth, are they all stemming from one reference that you have to this project, to our SDK, or do you have to have multiple? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so essentially, you can do all of these things if you follow the instructions in the first episode, Getting Started. That shows
Perfect.
you how to integrate the SDK. And all of those, pretty much all of those things here, they're a part of HERE SDK core,
Gotcha.
which is the SDK library you're integrating into the project. I've also recently written a blog post. Maybe you can find this and post it in chat, which is really the shortest, fastest version you can get a project like this set up. Under 5 minutes, you can basically have this done. So the 1 hour Waypoint episode is a lot more fun and also teaches you a lot more about how to build it from scratch and everything. But if you just want a project with a map in it and with the SDK integrated, that blog post is your best way to go.
And do you remember what it was called, any chance?
It was called build an app with an Android app with a map in it under 5 minutes. It's probably slightly more elegantly phrased, but something along this.
Got it. Okay.
Got it? Perfect.
Yep.
Okay, so for the search options, we need to put 2 parameters, and one is a language code. We'll pick ENUS because probably that's the easiest for all of us. I'm tempted to put it in German, but then things get confusing. Also, the map is centered around Manhattan, so I don't really need those things in German. And then the other thing we need to put in is, to make it more readable, we'll maybe say int max items. Let's make that 5, and is max items. So this is how many search results you want returned. So the options are, in which language do you want the search results returned, and how many do you want returned at a maximum. Now, maybe there's only 1 result, which is why it's a max number. But if, say, the API finds 20 different possible results for you to look at, it will only return 5. You can change it. So you can make this 30 if you like, but 5 will do just fine for us right now. Then the next thing we need to do is we need to create a query. And we want to start by searching for places just using a text search. So I put in those text. We've seen our text box earlier. I can put some text in there. We want to search based on that. So what we want to do here is we want to create a text query. Call that text query. We got to import that because that is part of HERE SDK search. Create a text query. And the text query new text query has, let's see, it would be nice if we can, there we go. If you look at the possible parameters for this, what it needs is a text string, which is a search string. It's the first parameter. I'm not sure you can see this because that doesn't really, even if I've increased the text view, the font size here on Android Studio, I don't think this autocomplete things get any bigger. So I won't do this. So I'll just say we need a text, the search text. And the other thing we need is a location context. And that location context can be one of three things. It can be just a coordinate, a geocoordinate. It can be a geobox, which is basically a rectangle drawn on the map, defined by two geocoordinates, the two corners. And the third one is a circle. So we're going just with a simple thing. We're going with coordinates. So we need to find a text, and we need to find B, the coordinates. Let's maybe start with getting the text. So we can essentially say string search text, and we say find view by ID. And now I got to remember what I called the text box, or the edit text as it's called. Edit text, I called it search text. So we can do find by ID, RID, search text. That gives us a reference to the text box, and from here we can say, I think does toString work already? I think no. I think we need to do get text. I don't think that works. I think what we'll do is yeah, what we need to do, we'll do an edit text. We'll call it edit text, then find view by ID, and then we'll say get. Also doesn't work, so we'll do it differently. We'll see if this works. Edit text, get text, toString. That works. Otherwise, we'd have to do some casting, but this works too. So we've got our search string. I'm going to take a sip of tea in celebration.
Hey, and while you're doing that, any chance maybe just to increase slightly the text size of your code editor?
Yeah, we can try that. I think we increased it last time. We're going under settings, font. We can do to 18. Let's try that. Is that better?
Yep.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So where are we? Now we need to find coordinates. Now what I want to do is I just want to pick the coordinates that are in the middle of the screen. Because usually when we're looking at a map, we're probably searching for things that are in view at the moment. So what I want to grab is the coordinates in the center of the screen. And we'll just quickly write a helper method for that. Get screen center. No, not public, we'll make that private, and it gives us back a geocoordinate. Get screen center. And then we'll say int screen width. And we want this in pixels, so we'll put that in there so it's easier to understand. And that is then view dot get, what's it called? Let me check. It should just be called, it's map view. That's why it didn't work. Map view get width. And we'll do the same thing for screen height in pixels equals map view dot get height. And then we'll set up a point to D because we want the middle. We'll set a new point to D, and we'll say screen width in pixels times half, and screen height in pixels times half. This gives us a new pixel. This gives us pixel coordinates, the middle of the screen. And now what we need to do is we need to use a helper method in the map view, which is called view to geo-coordinates. That takes a point 2D, and that now means we are converting those pixel coordinates in the middle of the screen into the geo-coordinates on the underlying map, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got get screen center, and we can just use that here, get screen center. No red squiggles, so that gives us a geo-coordinate back, and now we have defined a query and search options. That's good. And the next step then becomes, we can start searching. So we have our search engine. You remember we set that up earlier. And there's a method called search. What's interesting here, you can sort of see this, there's multiple queries. You can see that already. There's a text query, there's a place ID query, an address query, a category query, and a search without any kind of query. We'll look at some of those, and if we're lucky and have some time, we'll look at all of those briefly towards the end.
Okay.
And this search engine wants a query, which we've set up. Now it's in the way, which we have set up. We call it text query. It needs search options, which we set up, which we call search options. And then it needs a callback method. So let me see what that was called. It's just called search callback, kind of obvious. So that automatically builds that.
Sure.
And we have a search on completed method that gives us a search error in case something went wrong, or it gives us a list of results. And those are the places that the API returns back to us. Now, again, we should probably check if search error equals null, blah, blah, it does not equal null, and then do some error handling. We're going to be brave, and we're just going to plow on with our proper error handling, and we're just going to build a for loop. So for each place result in the list, we're going to do something. And I'm thinking we should probably just draw the item on the map, but I don't want to use a standard map marker because the standard map marker doesn't tell us anything about the place.
Okay.
One of the things you could do, and that would probably a better view to do in like a proper app, is to use the metadata function of the marker, which we talked about in the last episode. So each map marker, you can basically put in any kind of information that you want. And then when you're interacting with the marker later on, like tapping on it, you can pull that information out again, and then maybe put display information on the screen in some other fashion. In this case, I'm just going to use blunt force, and I'm just going to write the name of the place just on the map, and I'm going to use the code we wrote in the previous episode about how to add just a standard Android view to the map. And so I'm really just taking a text view here, and I'm just copy pasting all of this. There's nothing interesting happens here. You're just creating a text view, you're throwing it into a layout, and then you're pinning that view in the layout to these coordinates. Gotcha. So we can just copy paste that here. We have to change two things. First, we have our standard text view, which is dinosaur rocks, and then while that is correct, it is not what we want right now. So we want to go to the result and say, look at the things we see here. So we have a bunch of things. We have get title. We can get ID, keep that in mind, maybe for later when we talk about the ID query. If we have time, you get the address, you get bounding box, you get the coordinates where it is, and with get details, you get all kinds of things. You get categories, you get like phone numbers and email addresses, you get the opening hours of the place. So all the kind of information you would expect from our Places API can get through this. So in this particular case, we will just want to do something very simple. We'll just take get title, which is a nicely formatted name of the place as a string for us. And then the other thing we're going to do, obviously, we want to place this at the correct coordinates. So here we're taking the result and we're saying get coordinates. Then
can I ask a question on that? just from a computer geek perspective, the code that you copied that from, I think it was like add pin. I think that's what it was called.
Correct.
So if you would have added 2 parameters to the add pin method, you technically could have reused it, right?
Absolutely. And
Okay.
I'll probably should have done that, because my guess is I'll probably do the same copy paste a couple of times more. So maybe if we have some time, we'll just refactor that method or overload the method to be more elegant.
All those terms sounded so groovy when you said it. That's awesome.
And if I wanted to be elegant, I would have built a proper cool map marker, and I've started digging out the metadata function. The problem with all of that is that sometimes it's just faster to copy paste some code. And that's not great for production, but if you have like an hour-long show and you want to get through a lot of content,
course,
the faster way is sometimes the better way.
Sure.
Now let me see. Have I forgotten anything? I feel like I haven't forgotten anything. I'll do a quick note in my notes, but no. Theoretically, this should work. So this is always the scariest thing when you've written a bunch of code, and you're kind of hitting the button and seeing if it doesn't crash. So it's loading. Here we go. What shall we? So I'm moving this around because remember, we're taking the middle of the map as our search point. So it should be about here where my mouse pointer is. And now we're searching for something like, let's search for pizza.
Okay.
And then hit the places button. Hey, look.
Nice.
So obviously, again, this is not great UI design because all of these various pizza places overlap each other, but you can kind of see that they're all clustered around where our central point was. There's Joe's Pizza and Prince Saint Pizza and Lon Scott's Pizza and some other pizza we can zoom in and they might separate a little more. But I think my point is made. We searched in a place for pizza places for 5 items, and it gave us 5 pizza items.
Excellent.
We could, of course, also go and say for set text, do a little more. Let's maybe put max items to 2 so the map isn't as cluttered.
Sure.
And we could say something like get title plus a new line plus result get address. And that might be a little more helpful because then we can see where those are located.
Sure.
See if that works.
So we should see the name plus their address.
Correct. So
Okay.
we'll search again for pizza. We'll be in a slightly different place, so the results will probably be slightly different. No, I screwed up. I should have, of course, set
ToString.
address text.
Oh, address text. Okay.
It kind of automatically turned it, used ToString, but that just gives, in that case, just gives you the object information.
Which is exciting, but not necessarily what the users want.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
We're going for pizza, and well, we can just leave it there. That's still on the center. You should still be on Manhattan. Again, I got 2 things. So there's Adrian's Pizza Bar, and you get the whole address. And again, in reality, you probably wouldn't have to write United States on here. You can get the information is also available in a more structured format. So you can you can just go like 15 Stone Street, and that's probably all you need if you're in New York. Depends on context. You have to do with that what's right for your users.
And I forgot to ask you this, but last week on the episode, did you show, like, if you just, let's say you just have the name of the pizza place, but you want to hover over or click on that marker, could you make a more of a detailed expand, or is that just, or did you not discuss that?
Yeah, we did discuss putting a tap event on a marker. So that if you tap on a marker, you can then do whatever you want. And in fact, that's probably what you would want to do here. You would create a normal pin marker, maybe a little pizza icon or something. And then when you tap on it, you'd probably, and you probably wouldn't even pin this to the map as a view. You'd just have that open as either a little bubble over it, or just in a separate UI interface on the thing. Like you need to take one look at this and realize that I'm not a good UI person. So for that, you have to go for someone else. But I think this is a quick way to get my point here across, that you can get that data and figure that out.
But the key here is that all that data that you would want to display, however you display it, is coming from that result object that you have it that I believe is automatically populated when you call that the search.
Exactly.
Okay.
And what you do with that and how you display that is up to you. Just don't do it the way I do it.
Okay.
Ask someone who knows something about UIs and front-end development and so on. Okay, so we've now searched for places. And the other thing that our Geocoding and search API does is it searches for addresses. So let's do that.
Okay.
And the truth is that'll be a lot faster because we can really just take this, copy it, the whole thing, paste it over. And I think the only things we need to change is we need to change the text query to an address query.
Right.
We'll do that. Address query, and down here, address query. That doesn't work because I've not properly capitalized it or not capitalized it.
And that address query is still taking in as a parameter the content that's entered from the user?
So everything else is the same. So the max item thing still works. Let's just put this to 1 right now because maybe you just want to get the first result again, reduce clutter, but you can put that to 20, 30, whatever. The search options are the same. We're once again pulling the text from the search text from edit text. The address query is even constructed the same way. It needs the search string. It needs the coordinates. The search engine search parameter call is exactly the same, except we're putting in a different type of query. And that's it, really. The one thing I probably want to change here, because we now have one, what we can do is we can, am I in the right? I think I want to do this here. We can say map view dot get camera dot look at, and we'll say result dot get coordinates, and that will actually move our camera to center on the search result that we've
nice. I understand. Okay.
So this is new, but not necessarily directly related to the address search. So really, you see it works exactly the same way. The only thing you change is the type of query, where you're by using an address query object, just saying, hey, give me addresses instead of points of interest.
Now, just out of curiosity, you have max times equals 1, which makes sense in this scenario because you're going to center in on that one result. But if you had like 3, would it automatically do a bounding box, or would it just...
there are get bounding box... There are get bounding box methods in the SDK on various objects.
Sure.
I'm not immediately. I don't know off the top of my head if there is one that'll do, like, for multiple markers that'll do what you want right now.
That's okay.
So we can, if we have some extra time at the end, we can maybe investigate this. However, you can always try whatever you have. You can always try to see if it has a get bounding box object, and that is often the case. And then you can use that. And then I think and then the look at function also takes a geobox object, kind of how this would take not just a coordinate but a geobox. Similar, camera would do this too, and then it would automatically focus on that area.
And then Kubra speaking, or Shruti just mentioned that there is one for the group, and you just add the markers to the group. So,
I think that's the case in the 3.x SDKs. I don't think that feature has yet been added to the new SDKs. I'm assuming this is on the roadmap, but I don't think that's the case yet. So I think right now, if you want to group markers, you just put them in your own list. And then go do a for loop to delete. I presume groups are coming back in soon. Maybe if someone from the SDK team is in chat, they can maybe let us know. But right now, that feature is not in yet, I think.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, the whole reason why I'm asking, I think we did this on our home office hours where, it was like if you did this with map image, where it was an automatic, like if you had 3 different markers in 3 different locations, would it automatically center if you added that line? I think it's line 393. would it automatically center all of them if you had your max items at, let's say 4? But it's not important. I was just throwing
the camera does that when you put in a geobox, so that part works. I'm not sure how you can quickly get a geobox around 3 markers. Obviously, you can build that yourself. It's just a couple lines of code. But I think as a convenience function, that's currently not in the SDK, but will hopefully show up again soon.
But what was the result for this code? Because I don't know if we talked about that.
We haven't actually talked about it because we haven't tried it yet. So, cool. Okay, let's go here over Manhattan. And any street in New York you want to look for?
Oh my goodness! Don't do that to me.
Okay, I'll just try Broad Street instead of Broadway, the obvious one. Let's try that one, and there you go. Okay, so what I have, of course, it shows up twice because I made the mistake of not deleting it. So if it's an address that comes back, the title is already the address. So calling get address again and adding it is kind of superfluous. Mm-hmm. So we can do that again. Maybe search for something else. But you'll have seen that it focused on those. Did it focus on the coordinates? I think it did. Let's try something else.
Would it take a Fifth Avenue?
Give it a try. It should. Fifth Avenue. Whoa! Why did it crash? Maybe I should have done error handling after all, or the edit. I think the edit box is when you don't put any error handling around that. The edit box is also has been nitpicky with me about some things I typed into that. We'll just try this again, and if Fifth Avenue doesn't work, I guess we'll have to do some debugging. No, it crashes. Okay, you know what? I'm putting this down as a to-do for the end of the show.
Sure.
If we have more time and debugging this, seeing why it crashes, we'll have to
no worries.
Search error here. If it's a search error, or maybe it's something with the edit box,
sure.
Which kind of crashes when I hit backspace or something, which is weird. Okay, so we have searched for places, we have searched for addresses, gotten those results, put them on the map. What's next? Well, I think what's next is we wanted to do autocomplete. So for that, we probably do not want to draw these things on the map, because the usual use case is kind of you start typing and then you get a list of things displayed and you can pick one of those. Mm-hmm. Once again, what I'm not going to do is get but I think the correct way to do this on Android would be an autocomplete text view or autocomplete text box, but then I'd have to write a custom adapter in order to get to call the API when someone types, which isn't too bad, but again, time-wise, a little more critical. So I'm doing once again a kind of a crude brute force method. What we're just going to do is we're going to add here a list view to our app. So if I look at this, we'll just see I've just added a list view here with a couple of items to our user interface. And if we run this, we might even see it. And we're just going to populate that with the results of the autocomplete so we can focus on the actual autocomplete code and not the user interface. Now, most of the map is now obscured by this. So again, not good user interface design, but we'll populate this with some results and we'll kind of make sense.
Sure.
And we've got our message search autosuggest. So if we then later we can type something here, hit that button to call the autosuggest API.
Sure.
And the autosuggest part is really optimized to give you quick responses to shorter fragments of typing. So the idea is that while you type, it gets called multiple times and the list keeps updating.
Yeah.
So this one is really optimized to take these short fragments, get you good results for those. So you have to do very little typing, and also so the updates come in quickly for you so that you don't have to type like a lot. You type a couple of sentences and then have to wait forever for it to pop up.
Now, in your example, if I'm hearing you correct, your trigger is going to be pressing the button. It's not going to be based on like characters.
Because then I'd have to kind of build a little bit of a custom adapter.
Right.
And
yeah. No worries.
It's not particularly complicated, but it's too much.
I know what you mean. Sure.
Code.
Sure.
So one of the things that's good is we can copy again. This basically takes again a text query. We can copy this, nothing changes here. So we put this into Autosuggest. I think we'll change max items to 3 because I think that's what we had space for on our list view. In reality, you'd probably make the text a little smaller and give people at least 5 options, but mostly that's okay. Once again, we can now fire up our search engine, but in this case, we're not saying search, we're saying suggest. And everything is pretty similar. We're putting in our text query. We are putting in our search options. And we have a callback. However, in this case, it is called suggest callback, not search callback, because we're calling the suggest method. Kind of makes sense. Once again, error handling, we've already regretted not doing this earlier, so once again, we'll leave it out and see how much we'll regret it this time. And then let's just build like an array list of type string, and that's just gonna be, we'll collect our results in there. And then we can once again just do a for loop where we're saying for each suggestion, we'll call it suggest result in that list that we've gotten back. We can iterate over the results here. And I'm building an array list because I need to just basically create an array list of text strings that are get fed then into the list view. So we can say for each suggestion, for each suggest what we want to do is we want to get a place because the results are always places. This is kind of the same thing. So we're getting a place from the suggest result. Now here is the, I gotta say, get place. So we're getting the place from the suggest result. Now here's the thing. The result can be 2 things. It can be a place, so a specific point of interest. It could be a pizzeria, it could be a museum, it could be a hospital. It could also be an address because Autosuggest actually searches for both places and addresses, which makes sense because in most use cases where you start typing, either one should work. But what could happen is it isn't a place or a point of interest or an address. It could also sometimes be a further search suggestion. So for example, you could start typing rest, and what you might mean is, hey, show me all restaurants nearby. And so what it would do is would actually suggest to you the search term restaurant, and then you could pick that, and then the flow would actually be as the developer, you'd have to take that, feed it once again into the places search that we have here, and do another search and then display the results for that. So this is why we can't just say place equals suggest result get place, because what could happen is that the place could be null. If place is not null, we can go and just add the place.getTitle to the array list. But if it's not the case, what we want to do is we want to say, what is it? We'll say array list.add, obviously, and we'll just get the title of the auto suggest result itself. So suggest result.getTitle. And we'll try this out later and see how this works. Now, the only thing we still need to do is now create an adapter for the array for the list view and attach that to the list view. And because of time reasons, because we only have 15 minutes left, I'm just going to copy this over because this is kind of boilerplate code. A list view is just a standard view. Got to import those. And this is just an adapter for the data that goes into it, and we're feeding the array list in here, and a layout so the list view knows how to display it. We're getting the list view by using find view by ID, and then setting the adapter, and that means the data that we've just gotten back from the API is now fed into the list view and can be displayed there. And in fact, once again, that should probably be all that we need. We're starting this up.
Okay. And so after you do your first test, I'm going to ask a question. So be ready.
Okay, I'm ready. So I'm typing just like pits, because I'm looking for pizza, and I'm just typing, and now obviously after 3 letters or something that gets fired. We hit suggest. And we see, okay, cool. We get Pizza Plus, we get Adrian's Pizza Bar, and maybe I'll just do 3 other letters and it gets fired again. And we'll get more results. And then maybe I'll just start typing 3 other letters and it gets fired again. And now it gets more specific. Like I've got pizza and just, and now it just gives me Justino's Pizza, Justin, there's Justino's Pizzeria. I wonder if those are actually 2 different places in New York called Justino's that are competing.
So just a heads up, I don't know if it's a sign of the apocalypse or not, but your screen looks like it's about to...
Yeah.
It's back.
It's not back for me.
It's not? Okay.
Well, there are plenty of signs of the apocalypse right now. So hopefully
exactly.
Another one. Okay, I'm back because I just noticed the same thing and I was getting nervous.
Yeah. So at least everyone's okay. So here's the question I have for you on that. Okay. In fact, you may have already answered it, but I was going to say, what was the minimum amount of characters that you really need to feed that autosuggest? Is it 3?
No, you can just feed it 1. It's just at that point I hit backspace.
It's so generic, right?
It's kind of pointless. I think default is 3. Even I think for that auto suggest search box on Android, you can actually kind of set that as a parameter when it's supposed to fire. And 3 is a good 3 is a good value.
I find that 3 is usually the typical user experience. When I use that feature as a user at multiple places, it seems to kick in after 3.
Yeah, it kind of doesn't make sense to do it after every letter, because even then, if it's even though it's quite fast, you'll probably get the results by the time the user has typed in the other letter, so there might be more lag than you want to. But I've just typed P here, and well, it's obviously like okay, Pier 16 is like a semi-famous thing people sometimes go to in your area. Some interesting things too. You notice I've put in a point, and depending and we get, even here, if I just put in P, I put in a point in New York, but I did get like 2 other city results here actually, and the API tries to handle your requests as intelligently as it can. So if you put in a coordinate, or even if you put in a geo box, the search results are not necessarily completely restricted to that box. So for example, if I were to type in Paris, France here, even though I'm in New York, it'll get me Paris, France. Even if I had put a search box around Manhattan and said, this is where I want to search, if I typed in Paris, France, it would still give me Paris, France. It will also give me Paris Baguette, which is apparently a bakery in New York. But what it will not do is give you a Paris named bakery in Berlin, because that's not a globally relevant search result. So it'll give you the best results for nearby. And again, not necessarily the closest results, but it ranks them intelligently based on popularity and a bunch of other factors. So it'll give you the best results nearby, but if you type in something like this, it might also give you at least a globally relevant result. So that's kind of important to know too when you're using the API, that you're not kind of confused that you might get a Paris result even though you've drawn a box around New York. Cool. So maybe some things we still want to look at. We have, what, how much time do we have? We have 10 minutes. So I'll not write full code for it, but I will quickly tell you about some other things you can do. One is you can search by categories. This is kind of nice. I'm just going to type place category here, hit dot, and you can see a list of categories here. Accommodation, hotel, motel, businesses, eat and drink, coffee, restaurant, and you'll actually see there's these numbers behind. So we have this categorization system for parameters. If you go into the Geocoder API documentation, you can actually see the full list of this.
Okay.
But you can basically say, hey, I'm looking for bookstores. And then you can create a category query and pass it a list of place categories. So you can say, I can just make it a one item list and say, just say, I just want bookstores, put those into the category query, right? I can do a category query here. Category query, and you'll see that the, sometimes it pops up, sometimes it doesn't, but it really takes, instead of a text, it takes a list of these category places. That's basically the search term in that context, and otherwise it works exactly the same way. You call search engine search, put in the category query.
Hey, I got a question. I don't know how to say the name. I think it's Sedoling. Hopefully that's right.
Sedoling.
Yeah, but
pronouncing every single one of those wrong, so why would yours be any different? Please.
Sure. So is it possible to display open versus closed restaurants based on opening hours?
Absolutely. So what you can do is, if you have let's go to the search places. If we look at result here, we can get details, and in get details, we can get the opening hours. So when you go through these, you can pull the opening hours out. They come in a standardized format. It's in the documentation. You can compare that to the current local user time. And if the current local user time is in the opening hours, you can add it to the list. And if not, you can skip it. So you can very easily write a search that only displays the restaurants that are still open, which is kind of a useful thing.
Yeah, that's a good question. I like it.
Thank you. Okay, and then the last thing I wanted to talk about is reverse geocoding. So when we search for an address, what we're really doing is what's called geocoding. So we're taking a street address or a partial street address, and we are converting that into geocoordinates, latitude and longitude. Now, what you can also do is the reverse. You can take a latitude and a longitude and figure out what is the street address closest to that location. And this actually works exactly the same way as a normal address search, except you leave out the address query. So all you really have to do is not create a query object, just give it give it a location, call search on that. So it is, I think here, if you look at this, we have search. And instead of a query object, you give it a geocoordinate, because that is the only data in the query that you need. So there's no sense in wrapping that up in its separate object. So you just do search for geocoordinates, search option and callback, and then it'll give you the addresses, a list of addresses near that point. And that is reverse geocoding. And that really has taken us through all of the ways you can search. You can search for addresses, you can search for places, you can do autocomplete search, You can search by category, and you can do reverse geocoding, which is finding an address based on a location. And now all you need to do is take this knowledge and make it less hideous and more user-friendly. And you've got a great location-based application featuring search and geocoding.
Very cool.
And that's all I have for today.
Okay. Well, I'm going to take us back to our studio view. And, I would say I appreciated that. It's been a long time since I've been in any Java code. So it was kind of fun to follow that along. And, I'll have to ask you some questions beyond this on some of the things that were just Java related. But it was very good. I liked how you were explaining all those various facets of our location services. I wanted to see, Richard, and by the way, for those that are viewing, I always appreciate when Richard does these, it's what probably early evening for you out in Germany. So thank you for participating in our Waypoint series.
Well, isn't it early morning for you?
It's mid-morning now.
Okay.
So we've had our coffee. You're sadly going to be up all night, but it's normal for us to kind of have a little energy at this time. But I appreciate that you do this near the end of your evening, at the end of your workday. But I do want to ask if you had any plugs, anything that you want to share with our viewers.
See, I didn't think about this beforehand. I can always plug home office hours, which is on Thursday. So that's I think what I've had to plug. I literally had a 3-day work week last week, so it's not like I was hyper productive. So I don't have any cool stuff from myself to plug. Do you have anything to plug, Michael?
No, just the office hours. Stay tuned on that because Richard and I are scheming a way to make those even more exciting for everybody based on where they live. So, we'll leave that maybe to the next office hours to discuss. And also, if you look on the other side of Richard at that list over there, it'll contain some of the. Yeah, you're pointing to the right thing. Well, now you're pointing to me. Now you're pointing right. Yeah. That list over there that Richard's pointing to is some of the things that we mentioned in our chat, including some of the links to either the beginning episode of this Waypoint series or the entire Waypoint series, which includes all seasons. So if anybody was interested in that, great questions. Anything else, Mr. Richard?
No, I think I'm ready to have dinner and call it a day. So I feel good.
All right. Well, we'll wrap it up right now. Thank everybody for joining this episode. And if possible, we'll see you Thursday for our home office hours. Take care. Bye-bye.